What would you do if your mind split into six different people just to survive one childhood memory? Emma Whitmore sits in a psychiatric hospital, but she's not alone in her body. David protects her. Lily carries her fear. Rachel plans revenge. Alexandra manages her pain. And the witness? She remembers everything Emma tried to forget. When Dr. Jonathan Mercer attempts to integrate these fractured identities, he uncovers a truth buried for 28 years, a truth involving murdered children, powerful conspirators, and a mother's desperate attempt to protect her daughter from the same fate. What would you have done in Emma's place? Tell us in the comments below. Dr. Jonathan Mercer's inner voice was telling him something. They say the mind is like a castle. That's the first lie we tell ourselves. Dr. Jonathan Mercer stood in front of the one-way mirror watching her, the fluorescent lights humming monotonously. Emma Whitmore, patient 4719, the woman who would either destroy his career, perhaps his sanity, or save him. She sat motionless in the examination room, dominated by white and cold air, her blonde hair reflecting the harsh light from the ceiling like a halo. But there was nothing angelic in the emptiness of her green eyes. Those eyes had seen something. Excitement and dread washed over her body, or perhaps she had transformed into something else entirely. Mercer pressed his palm against the cold glass. He was 47 years old and had spent 23 of them in the darkest corridors of the human soul. But he had never encountered a case like this, or perhaps the cases he had encountered were ordinary to him. The file in his other hand felt heavier than its physical weight. "Dr. Mercer?" His colleague, Dr. Patricia Hayes, approached him. "He's been like this for 40 minutes. Not a word, not a movement." "She's listening," Mercer said quietly. "To what?" "To whoever's winning the war inside her head." Patricia shifted uncomfortably. "The husband, ex-husband, he's demanding answers, threatening legal action, says we're keeping her here against her will." Mercer's jaw tightened. Marcus Whitmore doesn't understand. His wife isn't being kept here. She's hiding here. From what? From herself. 3 weeks earlier, Emma Whitmore drove her Mercedes into a lake. Not fast enough to kill herself, that's what the police report concluded. But Mercer knew better. She hadn't been trying to die. She'd been trying to drown something inside her. When they pulled her out, soaking and shivering, she'd looked at the paramedics and said 5 words that eventually landed her in Mercer's care. "She made me do it." Who was she? That's what Mercer needed to find out. He pushed through the door into the consultation room. Emma's head didn't turn. She remained focused on some invisible point in the middle distance, her hands folded neatly in her lap. The designer clothes her family had brought her hung loosely on her frame. She'd lost weight, a lot of it. "Dr. Mercer," Mercer said, taking the chair across from her. "I'm Dr. Jonathan Mercer. I'm here to help you." Nothing. Not even a blink. He'd read her background a dozen times. Daughter of real estate mogul Richard Whitmore. Grew up in Manhattan's Upper East Side. Private schools, Ivy League education, marriage to Marcus Whitmore. Merger more than romance, the files suggested. 1 child, Sophie, age 10. Divorce finalized 8 months ago. Custody battle ongoing. But none of that explained the woman sitting before him now. "I know you can hear me, Emma," Mercer continued. His voice was steady, professional, yet something softer lived beneath it. And I know you're scared. Whatever you're experiencing, whatever you're trying to protect yourself from, we can face it together. Her lips parted slightly. Mercer leaned forward. I'm not, Emma whispered, her voice like dry leaves scraping pavement. I'm not Emma. The words sent a chill down Mercer's spine. He'd heard this before. Dissociative identity disorder, multiple personalities, the mind's ultimate defense mechanism against unbearable trauma, splitting itself into fragments, each one carrying a piece of the pain so the whole doesn't shatter completely. Then who are you? Mercer asked. Emma's head turned slowly toward him. When her eyes met his, they were different, harder, colder. I'm the one who remembers. What do you remember? Everything she tried to forget. That evening, he sat alone in his Mercer office, the city center lights casting long shadows across his desk. His wife Sarah had called twice. Both times he hadn't wanted to answer the phone, letting it go to voicemail. He knew what his wife meant or would say. It was the same thing she'd been saying for months. You care more about your patients than your own family. She wasn't wrong, actually. He opened Emma's brain scans on his computer. The neurologist's notes showed normal structural imaging, but the functional MRI told a different story. The fact that it was different from normal made the diagnosis even more complicated. During the scan session, when triggered by specific words like mother, basement, or remember, different regions of her brain lit up with patterns showing real neurological activity. This wasn't a performance, it was real. His phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Hayes. She's asking for you. Says he wants to talk. Mercer's blood ran cold. He? How many were there inside Emma's fractured mind? He grabbed his jacket and headed back to the hospital. The night shift nurses nodded as he passed. They were used to his obsessive hours. Emma was standing when he entered her room, standing at the window, looking out at the dark campus grounds. Dr. Mercer, she said without turning, but the voice was different again, deeper, masculine. Who am I speaking with? Mercer asked carefully. My name is David. Emma's body turned, but the movements were different, shoulders broader, stance wider. I've been protecting her for 28 years. Protecting her from what, David? From the truth. What truth? Emma's face, David's face, broke into a smile that contained no warmth whatsoever. That she killed someone, and she's about to do it again. The words hung in the air like poison gas. Mercer felt his pulse quicken, but kept his expression neutral. 23 years of training had taught him never to show shock, never to judge. But Emma's, David's words cut through his professional armor. Tell me about this person Emma killed, Mercer said, settling into the chair across from where she stood. He needed to ground this conversation, bring it back to therapeutic territory. Emma's body remained standing, that masculine posture still evident. Not Emma. She doesn't remember. That's why I exist. You carry the memory for her. I carry everything she can't bear to hold. Mercer pulled out his notebook. When did this happen, David? She was 10 years old. The voice cracked slightly, a fissure in the masculine presentation. Summer of 1996, the Whitmore estate in Connecticut. Her parents were hosting one of their famous garden parties. 200 guests, champagne flowing, nobody paying attention to the children. What happened? Emma's body remained standing, that masculine posture still evident. Not Emma. She doesn't remember. That's why I exist. You carry the memory for her. I carry everything she can't bear to hold. Mercer pulled out his notebook. When did this happen, David? She was 10 years old. The voice cracked slightly, a fissure in the masculine presentation. Summer of 1996, the Whitmore estate in Connecticut.
Her parents were hosting one of their famous garden parties. 200 guests, champagne flowing, nobody paying attention to the children. What happened? Emma's body moved to the window again, hands pressed against the glass. There was a boy, Christopher, the gardener's son. He was 12. Emma had a crush on him, that innocent, stupid kind of crush children have. Mercer wrote rapidly. Go on. He took her to the greenhouse, said he wanted to show her something special. But he didn't want to show her anything. He wanted to take something from her. The room temperature seemed to drop. Mercer had handled hundreds of trauma cases, but each one still had the power to reach into his chest and squeeze. He hurt her, said Mercer quietly. He tried. Emma's reflection in the window glass showed tears streaming down her face, even as the voice remained steady, detached. That's when I was born, in that moment. When Emma's mind couldn't handle what was happening, I stepped forward. And what did you do, David? I pushed him. There was a table behind him, covered in clay pots, heavy ones. He fell backward. His head hit the corner of that table. A pause. There was so much blood. Mercer's pen stopped moving. Was he killed? He didn't move. He didn't breathe. Emma started screaming, but nobody heard over the party noise. So I made her stop, made her quiet. Then I dragged his body behind the potting shed and covered it with bags of mulch. And then I made Emma forget. I took the memory, all of it. When her mother found her 20 minutes later, she was sitting in the rose garden, humming a song with dirt under her fingernails. They thought she'd been playing. Nobody connected her to the boy's disappearance.
In a warm and friendly tone, Mercer leaned back and used an inquisitive tone of voice. David, I need to ask you something important. Are you telling me a true story, or is this a story your mind has made up to explain Emma's trauma? The face in the window's reflection responded with a cold smile. What difference does it make? Do you think that's a very important detail? Real or made up, it lives inside her anyway. It shapes her entire being. It matters for the treatment. Christopher Martinez, 12 years old, disappeared on July 14, 1996. His body was never found. You can look it up, doctor. It was in the local news for weeks. Mercer felt an icy chill run through his veins. If this was true, if there really was a body, it would change everything. This was no longer just therapy. This was a confession of a crime. Even though the perpetrator had not been punished, he was bound by doctor-patient confidentiality, but there were exceptions: harm to others, ongoing danger. You said Emma is about to kill again, Mercer said carefully. What did you mean? Emma's body turned from the window. The eyes that met his were softer now, different again. The masculine energy had evaporated, replaced by something fragile, childlike. I'm scared, said a small voice. Not Emma's adult voice, not David's deep tone. This was someone else, someone younger. Who's speaking now? Mercer asked gently. My name is Lily. I'm 8 years old, and I'm scared of Rachel. Who's Rachel? She's angry. She's so angry all the time. David tries to keep her locked away, but she's getting stronger, especially since the divorce, since Marcus got custody of Sophie. Mercer's mind raced. Multiple alters, different ages, different genders, different roles. Classic DID presentation, but unusually complex. What does Rachel want to do, Lily? The child voice whispered. She wants to hurt Sophie's father. She says he's like Christopher. She says all men are like Christopher. She wants to make sure he never touches Sophie the way Christopher touched Emma. But Marcus hasn't hurt Sophie, has he? No. But Rachel doesn't care about truth. She only cares about protection, and she thinks the only way to protect Sophie is to— The voice broke off. Is to what, Lily? To make Marcus disappear,
just like Christopher. Mercer left the room 2 hours later, his mind spinning. He documented everything, but documentation felt inadequate for what he'd just witnessed. If Emma or one of her alters was planning to harm her ex-husband, Mercer had a duty to warn. But warning would shatter the therapeutic alliance, potentially destroying any chance of actually helping Emma integrate her fractured psyche. He called his wife from the hospital parking lot. For once, she answered on the first ring. "Jonathan, do you know what time it is? I need to tell you something. If this is about work, I might have to testify in a murder case, an old one, and possibly prevent a new one." Silence on the line. Then, "Jesus, Jonathan, what have you gotten yourself into?" "I don't know yet, but I need you to understand. If I'm distant the next few weeks, if I'm consumed by this, it's because someone's life might depend on it." "Someone's life?" Her voice was bitter. "What about your own life? Our life?" "Jonathan, no, I'm done, Jonathan. I've been done for months. I just didn't want to admit it. You chose your patients a long time ago. You chose their broken minds over our marriage." The line went dead. Sitting in Mercer's car, hand in phone, he sensed something cracking, even beginning to crumble within the carefully constructed castle he had built. He hadn't noticed the irony. While spending his days trying to mend shattered minds, his own life had fallen apart. He realized he hadn't thought about himself as much as he had thought about others. His phone vibrated. A message from hospital security. Patient 4719 was found in the bathroom. He had seriously injured himself. Dr. Hayes wants you to return immediately. Mercer started the engine, his personal crisis already fading into the background. Emma needed him, and he didn't want to be a hero who only thought of himself. And maybe, just maybe, he needed her too.
Blood painted abstract patterns across the white bathroom tiles. Emma sat on the floor, back against the wall, her left forearm wrapped in hastily applied gauze that was already soaking through. Dr. Hayes knelt beside her, checking vitals, while 2 nurses worked to clean the scene. Mercer pushed through the door, his trained eye immediately assessing the situation. The cuts weren't deep enough to be lethal. This wasn't a suicide attempt. This was something else. "She used a plastic knife from her dinner tray," Hayes said, standing. "Sharpened it somehow. Security's reviewing protocols." Mercer crouched down to Emma's eye level. Her green eyes were distant, unfocused. "Emma, can you hear me?" "She can't hear you." The voice was flat, emotionless. Different from David, different from Lily, different from Emma's own voice. "She's gone inside, where it's safe." "Who am I speaking with?" "My name is Alexandra. I'm the one who manages the pain." "You did this?" Mercer gestured to her arm. "Pain on the outside is easier to control than pain on the inside. It has a beginning and an end. It makes sense." Mercer had seen this before. This moment was not unfamiliar to him. Self-harm was a basic technique, a way to feel real, to escape emotional distress through physical sensations. However, in a dissociative system, this situation became even more complicated. Different alters could harm the body for various reasons, sometimes without the primary personality's awareness or consent. It was even known that many patients had killed themselves for this reason. "Alexandra, you need to help me understand something. How many people are in Emma's mind, or which one are you?" A pause. "I don't know all of them. We don't all communicate. Some are buried too deep. But I know the main ones. David, the protector. Lily, the child. Rachel, the avenger. Me, the pain manager. And then there's—" She stopped. "There's who?" "The one we don't talk about. The one even David fears." "What's their name?" Emma's face contorted, a flash of terror crossing her features. "We call her the Witness. She was there at the very beginning, before Christopher.
before everything, she knows what really happened in that greenhouse. And what really happened when? That's what you need to find out, Doctor. Because the story David told you, that's not the whole truth. It's what we've told ourselves for 28 years. But the witness, she remembers what actually happened in that greenhouse. And if she comes forward, Alexandra's voice dropped to a whisper, everything changes.
In a warm and friendly tone, Mercer ordered Emma transferred to the secure wing under 24-hour observation. As the orderlies wheeled her out, he caught Dr. Hayes by the arm. "I need you to do something for me," he said, discreetly. Hayes raised an eyebrow. "How discreet?" "I need you to research a missing person case. Christopher Martinez, age 12, disappeared July 14, 1996 from the Whittemore estate in Connecticut. Find out everything you can. Police reports, newspaper articles, family interviews. Everything." "Jonathan, if there's a criminal element to this case, I don't know what this is yet. That's why I need the information. Just get it for me." Hayes studied his face. "You're getting too involved. You know that, right? You're crossing lines." "Maybe, but if I don't cross them, a 10-year-old girl might lose her mother forever, or her father might end up dead. Or you might end up destroyed." Hayes's voice was gentle but firm. "I've seen it happen, Jonathan. Good psychiatrists who get so tangled up in their patient's pathology that they can't find their way out. You're already there. Your wife called me last week. Did you know that?" Mercer felt his stomach drop. "Sarah called you? She's worried about you. She said you're having nightmares, talking in your sleep about patients. She said you barely eat, barely sleep, barely exist outside these walls. That's not—" "It is true. Look at yourself. When was the last time you took a day off? When was the last time you left here before midnight?" Mercer had no answer. The truth was, he couldn't remember. The hospital had become his entire world. His patients' fractured realities had become more vivid than his own life. "Just get me the information," he said finally. "Please." Hayes sighed. "Fine, but after this case, you're taking a leave. I'm not asking, I'm telling you, as your colleague and your friend." It was 3 in the morning. Mercer sat alone in his office, files spread out on his desk. The night, the room, and his mind were all quite chaotic. He had uncovered Emma's entire past, medical records, psychological evaluations from her childhood, school reports, every detail related to her history, everything provided by the family's lawyers. And among that information he found something very striking. A psychiatric evaluation of Emma when she was just 7 years old, 3 years before Christopher Martinez disappeared. The evaluation had been requested by the pediatrician after Emma's teacher reported worrisome behavior. The child had been found by the school janitor talking to herself in the school basement during recess. When asked who she was talking to, Emma said, "My friend who lives in the dark, my close friend." The evaluating psychiatrist had noted, patient presents with rich fantasy life, possibly indicative of early dissociative tendencies. Mother reports patient has imaginary friend named the witness, who sees everything. Recommend follow-up evaluation in 6 months. There was no follow-up evaluation on record. Either the Whittemores had ignored the recommendation, or they'd taken Emma to a different doctor whose records weren't in this file. But the important detail was clear. The witness had existed before Christopher Martinez, before the greenhouse incident, before whatever trauma had supposedly created Emma's alternate identities. Which meant David's story, the narrative about killing Christopher being the original trauma that fractured Emma's mind, might be a cover, a false memory constructed to hide something even worse. What had happened to 7-year-old Emma Whittemore? Mercer's phone rang, shattering the silence. Unknown number. He answered anyway. "Dr. Mercer, this is Marcus Whittemore, Emma's ex-husband. I need to talk to you about my daughter." "Mr. Whittemore, I can't discuss patient information. I'm not asking about Emma. I'm asking about Sophie. She's been having nightmares, terrible ones. She wakes up screaming about the lady in the mirror and the dark place." Mercer's blood turned to ice. Dissociative identity disorder has genetic components, but it also requires severe trauma to develop. if Sophie is showing symptoms. Has anything traumatic happened to Sophie recently? Mercer asked carefully. A long pause. That's what I need to talk to you about. Sophie says her mother told her a secret before the car accident, before Emma was hospitalized. She made Sophie promise never to tell anyone. What secret? I can't say. Sophie's terrified, but she keeps drawing the same picture over and over, a greenhouse and 2 children and something dark in the corner.
Mercer agreed to meet Marcus Whitmore the following morning in a neutral location, a coffee shop 3 blocks from the hospital. He knew it was ethically complicated discussing a patient's case with her ex-husband, but if a child was in danger, professional boundaries had to bend. Marcus arrived 15 minutes early. Mercer spotted him through the window. Tall, athletic build, expensive suit, but shadows under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. He looked like a man carrying unbearable weight. Dr. Mercer. Marcus stood when he entered, extending his hand. His grip was firm, desperate. Thank you for seeing me. I know this is irregular. Sit down, Mr. Whitmore. Mercer ordered black coffee, nothing else. His stomach had been in knots for days. Tell me about Sophie's drawings. Marcus pulled out his phone, swiping through photos. She's drawn this maybe 50 times in the past 2 weeks, always the same image. Mercer took the phone. The drawing showed a glass structure, unmistakably a greenhouse. 2 stick figures stood inside, one slightly larger than the other, but in the corner, rendered in heavy black crayon, was a shape that could either be a person or a shadow. It was impossible to tell which. Has Sophie explained what this is? Mercer asked. She says it's where Mommy's secret lives, and she says the dark thing in the corner is the witness. Marcus's voice cracked. Doctor, I thought Emma's condition was contained, manageable. The lawyers assured me her mental health issues wouldn't affect Sophie as long as I maintained primary custody. But now... Has Sophie spent time with Emma recently? Not since the hospitalization. Before that, Emma had supervised visitation twice a month. But something happened during their last visit. Sophie came back different, quieter. She started having accidents at night, wetting the bed. That hadn't happened since she was 4. Mercer felt the pieces shifting, rearranging themselves into a pattern he didn't want to see. What did Emma and Sophie do during that last visit? Emma took Sophie to the family estate in Connecticut. The property has been mostly vacant since her father died 2 years ago. I didn't like it, but the court order said Emma could take Sophie anywhere within state limits. Marcus's hands trembled around his coffee cup. When I picked Sophie up that evening, she wouldn't talk about the visit. She just kept asking me if secrets ever die. If secrets ever die, Mercer repeated slowly. Yeah, and when I asked her what she meant, she said, Mommy showed me where the dead secret lives. Then she wouldn't say another word. The coffee shop suddenly felt too small, too warm. Mercer's mind raced through possibilities, each one darker than the last. Emma had taken Sophie to the Connecticut estate, the same property where Christopher Martinez had allegedly disappeared 28 years ago. Mr. Whitmore, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Did Emma ever discuss her childhood with you? Anything about trauma, about things that happened at that estate? Emma never talked about her childhood. When we first met, I thought she was just private, but after Sophie was born, I started noticing things. Emma would have these episodes where she'd just disappear. Not physically. She'd be standing right there, but it was like nobody was home. Her eyes would go blank. Once, I found her in Sophie's nursery at 3 in the morning, just standing over the crib, whispering, I won't let them hurt you. I won't let them make you disappear. Did you ask her what she meant? She didn't remember saying it. She never remembered the episodes. That's when I started pushing her to see a psychiatrist.
But her family, the Whitmores, they don't believe in therapy. Old money mentality. You handle things privately. You don't air your trauma to strangers. His laugh was bitter. I should have fought harder, should have insisted. Maybe if I had... This isn't your fault, Mercer said firmly. Mental illness isn't caused by lack of intervention. It's caused by trauma, usually severe trauma in early childhood. Whatever happened to Emma, it happened long before you met her. Then help her, doctor, please. Not for my sake, not even for hers, for Sophie. That little girl deserves a mother who's whole. After Marcus left, Mercer sat alone with the drawings on his phone screen. He zoomed in on the dark figure in the corner. Sophie had pressed so hard with the black crayon that she'd torn through the paper in places. This wasn't just a casual doodle. This was terror translated into art. His own phone buzzed. Dr. Hayes, found the Martinez file. You need to see this. My office, now.
20 minutes later, Mercer stood in Hayes's cramped office, staring at photocopied police reports spread across her desk. Christopher Martinez, Hayes began, age 12, disappeared July 14, 1996, from the Whitmore estate during a garden party. Last seen heading toward the greenhouse around 4 p.m. When his mother realized he was missing 2 hours later, a search was organized. They found nothing. No body, no evidence, no witnesses. Emma would have been 10, Mercer said. Yes, and she was questioned by police along with all the other children present. According to the report, Emma told officers she'd been in the rose garden all afternoon and hadn't seen Christopher. Her mother corroborated this. No reason to suspect her further. What happened to the case? The incident cooled down. The general perception was that Christopher had run away. His home life was difficult. His father was violent. His mother struggled with addiction. The police thought he had taken advantage of the chaos at the party to disappear, perhaps hitchhiking to another state. However, his body was never found, and there were no reports of him being alive anywhere else. Mercer examined the photocopy of Christopher Martinez. Christopher was a thin boy with dark hair and an uncertain gaze. So David's story could be true. Emma accidentally killed him, hid the body, and her mind may have fragmented to protect herself from guilt. You could be right, Hayes said carefully, but there's something else. Something the police couldn't connect at the time because they had no reason to investigate the Whitmore family more deeply, or something the police overlooked. He pulled another file from his bag. Richard Whitmore, Emma's father, died 2 years ago of liver failure. He was a troubled alcoholic for decades, but before he died, he was treated at this hospital. He entered a substance abuse program, and during admission, he made some alarming and noteworthy statements to the addiction counselor. Hayes slid the notes across the desk. Mercer read, "Patient reports significant guilt regarding family secrets. States he should have protected his daughter. When pressed for details, patient became agitated and refused to elaborate. Later that evening, patient told night nurse, 'Some houses shouldn't have basements. Some things should stay buried.'" "The Whitmore estate has a basement," Mercer said slowly. "A large one. Original construction from 1887. It was sealed off in 1997, 1 year after Christopher Martinez disappeared. Official reason given was structural concerns. The pieces were falling into place, creating a picture Mercer desperately didn't want to see. Who ordered the basement sealed? Richard Whitmore himself. Silence filled the office. Outside, the hospital hummed with its usual activity, life-saving, healing, moving forward. But in this small room, Mercer felt time collapsing backward, pulling him toward a truth that had been buried for nearly 3 decades. "I need to talk to Emma again. I need to reach the witness." "Jonathan, if what we're thinking is true, if something happened in that basement, if Richard Whitmore was involved, this goes beyond therapy. This is criminal investigation territory." "I know, but Emma's the only one who knows what really happened.
And if the witness won't come forward voluntarily, you'll force her, Hayes finished, through hypnosis or drug-facilitated interview. You'll break down whatever walls Emma's mind built to protect itself from guilt. I have to, before Rachel decides to act on her revenge fantasies, before Sophie becomes as fractured as her mother, before more damage is done. Hayes met his eyes. And what about the damage to you? Pushing a patient this hard, forcing buried memories to surface, it could destroy her. It could destroy you both. Mercer gathered the files. Then it destroys us, but at least the truth will be free. Mercer requested a specialized therapy session for the following day. He needed controlled conditions, recording equipment, a colleague present as witness, and Emma's legal guardian's consent. Since Emma was a voluntary admission and technically competent, she could consent to the procedure herself during lucid moments. At 2 p.m., Emma sat down in the therapy chair, looking small, alone, and fragile. She was herself today, at least as she presented herself to the world, without hiding anything or being able to hide anything. Her blonde hair was pulled back, and there was weariness and something deeper on her face. Perhaps acceptance, perhaps giving up the fight. Emma, Mercer began gently, I need to talk to you about what we're going to do today. I want to use a technique called facilitated recall. It's not exactly hypnosis, but it allows us to access memories that may be buried deep inside. Emma's green eyes met his. You want to talk to the witness? Yes. He won't come willingly. He'll never come. He's not easily persuaded. Why not? Because what she saw, what she knows, it's too terrible. Even for all of us together, it's too much to hold. That's why we had to split into so many pieces. One person couldn't carry it all. Mercer leaned forward. Emma, I spoke with your ex-husband. Sophie's been having nightmares. She's drawing pictures of a greenhouse and something dark. She told Marcus that you showed her where the dead secret lives. Emma's face crumpled. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I didn't mean to hurt her. I thought if she knew, if she understood, she could protect herself better than I did. But I was wrong. I've infected her with this, with us. What did you show Sophie at the estate? The basement door, the one my father sealed. I told her that's where bad things got locked away. I thought I was teaching her about safety, about boundaries, but all I did was pass the curse to another generation. Dr. Hayes, sitting in the corner with the recording equipment, shifted uncomfortably. Mercer pressed on. Emma, what happened in that basement? I don't remember. That's the truth, Dr. Mercer. I've tried to remember. I've spent years in therapy trying to piece it together, but there's nothing, just darkness and the feeling of being somewhere cold and small. That's why we need the witness. She remembers. Emma's hands gripped the arms of the chair. If you do this, if you force her out, you have to promise me something. What? You'll make sure Sophie never finds out. Whatever the witness tells you, whatever really happened, my daughter can never know. She's already carrying too much of my damage. Mercer couldn't promise that, not ethically, but he nodded anyway. I'll protect Sophie however I can. Emma took a deep breath. Then do it. Break me open. Let's see what's been rotting inside all these years.
The facilitated recall technique required medication, a carefully calibrated dose of a sedative that lowered inhibitions while keeping the patient conscious and communicative. As the drug entered Emma's system through an IV drip, Mercer watched her body relax, her breathing deepen. Emma, can you hear me? Yes. Her voice was soft, distant. I want you to go back to when you were a child, back to the Whitmore estate. Can you do that for me? I'm there. I'm always there. I never really left. How old are you? 7. I'm 7 years old. Mercer glanced at Hayes. 7. the age when Emma had first been evaluated by a psychiatrist, when she'd first mentioned the witness. "What's happening when you're 7, Emma?" "Daddy's parties. There's always parties. Mommy drinks too much and smiles at people she hates. I hide in the library usually, with my books." "Is this the day something happened, the day the witness was born?" A long pause. When Emma spoke again, her voice was different, younger, smaller, terrified. "I wasn't supposed to go downstairs. The basement was Daddy's special place. He said children weren't allowed. But I heard noises, bad noises, someone crying." Mercer's heart hammered. "What did you do?" "I opened the door, the one at the end of the hallway, the one that's always locked, but that day it wasn't locked. Someone forgot to lock it." "And you went down?" "The stairs were dark. It smelled bad down there, like dirt and something else, something rotten. And I heard the crying louder now, a boy crying, saying, 'Please stop, please stop.'" "What did you see, Emma?" Her breathing quickened. "There were candles, lots of candles, and people in a circle. Daddy's friends, important people, people from TV, people who run the city. And in the middle," her voice broke, "in the middle was a boy, Christopher. But this was before the garden party. This was 3 days before." Mercer felt sick. What were they doing to Christopher? "Bad things, hurting things. And Daddy was there, my daddy, doing the worst things. And they saw me, they all saw me standing on the stairs. And Daddy said—" Emma's voice shifted, became deeper, became Richard Whitmore's voice. He said, "Get her. She can't tell. She can never tell." What happened next? "Someone caught me. I don't remember who it was. Everything suddenly went dark. I must have fainted. When I woke up, I was in my bed. It was morning. When I looked at the date on the table, I realized 3 days had passed. There was a party. I could hear voices. It was a garden party. Christopher was there. He was walking around. He was alive." Mercer was confused. "But you said you saw him." "That's when I understood. That's when the witness was born, to hide the impossible truth. Because Christopher died in that basement. I saw him die. But then he was alive at the party. So either I was crazy, or what? Or there were 2 Christophers, or I saw the basement in my dream, or time went backwards. I was between fantasy and reality, or reality isn't real. My brain couldn't handle these contradictions, so it split. The witness took the memory of the basement. Emma kept the memory of the garden party, and neither of us could see the whole picture. But then Christopher disappeared during the party." "Yes." Emma's face was wet with tears. "And maybe I did push him. Maybe David's memory is true, too. Maybe I killed him because some part of me, some deep part that the witness couldn't fully contain, knew he had to be dead, knew he was supposed to be dead, knew that the Christopher walking alive was wrong somehow." The room felt airless. Hayes had gone pale. Mercer struggled to maintain professional composure. "Emma, is the witness here now? Can I speak with her directly?" Emma's body went rigid. Her eyes, which had been half closed, snapped open. But they weren't Emma's eyes anymore. They were ancient, knowing, filled with unspeakable sorrow. "I've been here the whole time, watching you fumble towards truth like a blind man in a maze. Do you want to know what I witnessed, Doctor? Do you really want to know what they did in that basement?" "Yes," Mercer said, though every instinct screamed to stop, to turn back, to leave this alone. "They broke him," the witness said flatly.
They broke that boy in every way a human can be broken, and when they were done, they disposed of him, buried him somewhere on the estate, and 3 days later they brought his younger brother to the garden party. They brought little Miguel Martinez, who looked so much like Christopher that a traumatized 7-year-old girl couldn't tell the difference. The truth detonated in Mercer's mind. The boy who disappeared wasn't Christopher, he said slowly. It was Miguel, the younger brother. They brought him to cover up Christopher's murder, and when Emma recognized him, or thought he recognized him, he panicked, the witness concluded. He pushed him in anger. He accidentally killed him, and then he lived for 28 years believing he had killed the same child twice. It was a puzzle his mind couldn't solve. It was a shadow that wouldn't leave him whenever he turned on the light. That's why we were completely shattered.
The therapy room fell into crushing silence. Hayes had stopped taking notes, her pen froze in midair. Mercer felt the weight of what the witness had revealed pressing down on him like concrete. 2 boys, he said, his voice hoarse. 2 brothers, both dead. Christopher's body is still in that basement, the witness continued, speaking through Emma's mouth with terrible clarity. Behind the western wall, they built a false partition, buried him in the foundation. Miguel, they disposed of him elsewhere, probably in the woods beyond the estate. Animals would have scattered the remains decades ago. And Emma's father, Richard Whitmore, he was part of this? He organized it. The basement rituals, the people who attended, powerful men with powerful appetites. Men who thought their money and status put them above human law, above human decency. Mercer's hands trembled. How many children? Over the years? I don't know. The witness only saw that one night, but the basement had been used for a long time. The smell alone told that story. Why didn't you come forward sooner? Why did you keep this hidden for 28 years? Why didn't you tell anyone? Emma's face, the witness's face, twisted in pain. Because who would believe a fragmented mind? A little girl claiming her father and his society friends killed children in satanic rituals. It sounds like hysteria, like false memory syndrome, like the satanic panic of the 90s, like believing what she made up in her own mind. Emma would be committed to a mental hospital, drugged, dismissed as crazy. Her testimony would be worthless. And the men who did this, they would walk free and make sure Emma never spoke again. The terrible logic was inescapable. A traumatized child's uncorroborated testimony against wealthy, powerful men would have gone nowhere. Emma's mind had protected her the only way it could, by fragmenting, by hiding the truth even from herself. But there's evidence, said Mercer. The sealed basement, your testimony under medical supervision. Police can excavate. Can they? The witness's smile was bitter. Richard Whitmore is dead. Most of his friends from that era are dead. The ones still alive, they're senators, CEOs, judges. They have armies of lawyers. And what do you have? The drug-facilitated testimony of a woman diagnosed with severe dissociative disorder, a woman who drove her car into a lake, a woman whose credibility is 0. But the bodies will be hard to find after 30 decades. And even if you find them, what then? You'll connect them to a conspiracy of wealthy men based on recovered memories, memories that every expert will testify are notoriously unreliable, especially under pharmaceutical influence? The witness shook her head. You're a good man, Dr. Mercer, but you're naive. The powerful protect themselves. They always have. They always will. Hayes finally spoke, her voice shaking. Then what was the point of remembering? If there's no justice possible, why surface these memories at all? Because Emma has a daughter, the witness said simply, and the cycle has to end. Sophie is already showing signs. The drawings, the nightmares, the dissociation. She inherited her mother's vulnerability.
And if Emma doesn't integrate, doesn't heal, Sophie will fracture too. The trauma will pass to another generation, and maybe another after that. Mercer understood. This wasn't about criminal justice. This was about breaking a transgenerational trauma and silence. "So what do we do?" he asked. "You help Emma become whole again. You take all of us, David, Lily, Alexandra, Rachel, and me, and you help her weave us back together, not erasing us, but integrating us, making her one person who can hold all these truths without shattering. That kind of integration therapy takes years. Then we'd better start now."
In a warm and friendly tone, Emma came back to herself slowly, blinking in confusion. What happened? How long was I under? 45 minutes, Mercer said gently. Do you remember what we discussed? Emma's face paled. The basement. Oh, God. The basement was real. Yes. She looked down at her hands as if seeing them for the first time. I've spent my whole life thinking I was broken, thinking my mind was playing tricks on me. But I wasn't crazy. I witnessed something real, something evil. You weren't crazy, Mercer confirmed. You were a child who saw something no child should ever see, and your mind protected you the only way it knew how. But I did kill Miguel. The witness confirmed that. I pushed him and he died. You were 10 years old, severely traumatized, and you didn't understand what was happening. That's not murder, Emma. That's tragedy. Tears streamed down her face. Tell that to Miguel's mother. Tell that to Christopher's family. They've lived for 3 decades without answers, without closure, because I was too broken to speak the truth. You were a victim, Mercer said firmly. Don't let the guilt destroy you. That's what they want, the men who did this. They want their victims to stay silent, to blame themselves, to self-destruct. Don't give them that power. Emma wiped her eyes. So what do I do now? How do I live with this? One day at a time, with intensive therapy, with medication to manage the dissociation, with support from people who believe you. Marcus will never let me near Sophie again, not after this. Marcus deserves to know the truth. Not all the details, Sophie doesn't need to carry that burden, but he needs to understand that you're not dangerous, you're traumatized, and that with proper treatment, you can be the mother Sophie needs. And Rachel? David said she wants to hurt Marcus. What if I can't control her? Mercer took a deep breath. That's why we're moving you to the long-term treatment wing, intensive integration therapy, 3 sessions a day. We're going to work with all your alters, help them understand their roles, negotiate their needs. Rachel's rage is understandable. She's trying to protect Sophie from men like your father. But we'll teach her that Marcus isn't the enemy, that protection doesn't require violence. What if it doesn't work? What if I'm too broken? You're not broken, Emma. You're fractured, and fractured things can be mended. They're never quite the same as they were before. The cracks always show, but they can be whole again, functional, even beautiful in their imperfection. Emma managed a weak smile. You're very optimistic for a psychiatrist. Someone has to be. That evening, Mercer sat in his car in the hospital parking lot, unable to drive home. His phone showed 17 missed calls from Sarah. He didn't have the energy to call back, to explain, to defend his choices. Hayes had already contacted the ethics board, starting the process of involving law enforcement. Mercer knew what came next: investigations, depositions, media attention. Emma's story would become public. The Whitmore family name would be destroyed. Powerful people would deploy their legal weapons. And through it all, Emma would have to hold herself together. A woman who'd spent 28 years splitting apart would have to learn to be one person again. Mercer's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Marcus.
Emma's lawyer contacted me, explained some things. I need to apologize. I didn't understand what she'd been through. Can we talk about supervised visitation? Sophie keeps asking for her mother. A small light in the darkness. Maybe not justice, but something like hope. Mercer started the engine. He had 17 missed calls to return, a marriage to salvage, and a patient who needed him to be strong enough to guide her through hell and back. The fortress of the mind, he thought. The witness was right. It wasn't about being unbreakable. It was about finding the cracks, acknowledging them, and learning to live as a whole person despite them. Or maybe because of them.
6 weeks into intensive integration therapy, Emma had her first full breakthrough and her first complete breakdown. Mercer had been working with her alters individually, teaching them to communicate with each other rather than operating in isolation. David had been resistant at first, convinced his role as protector meant maintaining strict boundaries. Rachel had been hostile, viewing the integration process as a betrayal of her mission to protect Sophie from all men. But gradually, with patience and pharmaceutical support, the walls between identities had begun to soften. Then came the session that changed everything. It started routinely enough. Emma sat in the therapy chair, eyes closed, breathing exercises helping her access the internal landscape where her alters existed. Mercer guided her through visualization techniques, imagining a house where all the parts of herself lived in separate rooms, then slowly opening doors between those rooms. "Who's present right now?" Mercer asked. "I am," Emma's voice. "And I can feel David nearby. And Lily. She's scared." "Why is Lily scared?" "She's always scared. That's her job, to carry the fear so the rest of us can function." "Can you talk to Lily? Ask her what she needs?" Emma's face shifted slightly, becoming younger, more vulnerable. "I need Mommy," Lily's voice whispered. "But Mommy doesn't see me. She looks right through me like glass." This was new territory. They'd never addressed Emma's mother directly in therapy. Catherine Whitmore had died 5 years ago from a stroke, taking whatever knowledge she'd had of her husband's activities to her grave. "Catherine, your mommy couldn't see you because she couldn't see what was happening," Mercer said gently. "Sometimes adults miss things because they're too painful to acknowledge." She knew. The voice was flat, certain. She knew what Daddy did in the basement. She knew, and she chose the parties and the pretty dresses and the reputation over me, over all the children. Mercer felt the session shifting into dangerous territory. "How do you know she knew?" "Because the night I went down to the basement, the night I saw Christopher, when Daddy's friends grabbed me and everything went dark, when I woke up 3 days later, Mommy was sitting on my bed, and she said, 'You had a bad dream, darling.' That's all it was, a bad dream. We don't talk about bad dreams. We smile and we're grateful for our beautiful life." Emma's body began to shake. All the alters were surfacing simultaneously, their boundaries dissolving. This was what Mercer had been working toward, a moment of integration, but it was happening too fast, too intensely. "Emma, I need you to stay with me," Mercer said urgently. "You're safe. You're in the hospital. Nothing can hurt you here." But Emma wasn't listening. Her eyes had rolled back, her breathing erratic. "She made me forget. She made me smile. She dressed me up like a doll and paraded me at the next party and told everyone what a happy family we were. And I believed her. I had to believe her. Because if Mommy knew and did nothing, then there was no safety anywhere in the world. Emma, there was no safety." The scream tore from her throat. "If your own mother won't protect you, if she chooses money and status and reputation over your life, then you're already dead. You're already gone. That's when Emma died. That's when we had to be born." She was on her feet now, backing toward the corner of the room. Dr. Hayes moved to the door, ready to call for sedation if needed, but Mercer held up a hand. This was the climax, the moment when all the fragmented pieces of Emma's psyche confronted the central wound. "You're right," Mercer said, standing slowly, keeping his voice calm. "Emma died that day. The innocent child who trusted her parents, who believed the world was safe. She couldn't survive what happened, so she split. She became David to fight, Lily to feel the fear, Alexandra to manage the pain,
Rachel to seek revenge, and the witness to hold the unbearable truth. And me? Emma's voice raw and broken. What am I? The shell they all hide inside? You're the one who survived. You're the one who got up every morning and lived despite carrying all this weight. You're the one who loved Sophie enough to break the cycle. I infected Sophie. I showed her the basement door. I'm just like my mother, passing the trauma down. No, Mercer stepped closer. Your mother chose silence. You chose truth. Even fractured, even broken, you're trying to protect your daughter in ways you were never protected. That's not infection. That's love. Emma collapsed to her knees, sobs racking her body. And then something extraordinary happened. Mercer watched as her face cycled through expressions. David's stern protectiveness, Lily's childish fear, Alexandra's detached pain management, Rachel's fury, and the witness's ancient sorrow. "We don't have to be separate anymore," Emma whispered, her voice a chorus of all her parts. "We can be one person who remembers everything, who survived everything, who carries all of it together." "Yes," Mercer breathed. "Yes, you can." The integration wasn't complete. It would take months, maybe years of continued work. But in that moment, Emma became more whole than she'd been in 28 years. The walls between her identities didn't disappear, but they became permeable, allowing communication, allowing cooperation. She looked up at Mercer with clear eyes. "I want to see Sophie."
The supervised visitation was arranged for the following week. Marcus brought Sophie to a neutral family therapy room in the hospital. Mercer observed from behind the one-way mirror, ready to intervene if needed. Sophie Whitmore was small for 10 years old, with her mother's blonde hair and her father's serious eyes. She entered the room hesitantly, holding her father's hand. Emma sat in a chair by the window, wearing civilian clothes instead of hospital garments. She'd lost weight, gained gray hairs, aged a decade in 6 weeks, but her eyes were present in a way they hadn't been before. "Hi, baby," Emma said softly. "Hi, Mommy." Sophie's voice was tiny. Marcus squeezed his daughter's shoulder. "I'll be right outside, sweetheart. If you need me, just come get me." After Marcus left, mother and daughter sat in awkward silence. Finally, Sophie spoke. "Are you better now?" "I'm getting better. It's going to take time, but I'm trying very hard." "Daddy said you were sick, in your mind." "That's right. Something bad happened to me when I was a little girl, even younger than you, and my mind got confused trying to protect me from the bad memories." Sophie pulled out a folded piece of paper from her pocket. Another drawing. She handed it to Emma. This one was different from the greenhouse pictures. This showed 2 figures, one large, one small, holding hands under a rainbow. At the bottom, in careful child handwriting, "Mommy and Sophie, together again." Emma's composure shattered. She pulled Sophie into her arms, both of them crying. "I'm so sorry, baby. I'm sorry I scared you. I'm sorry I took you to that house. I thought I was teaching you to be safe, but I was just passing my fear to you." "It's okay, Mommy. Dr. Maria says sometimes grown-ups make mistakes when they're hurting." "Dr. Maria is very smart, and she's right, but I'm going to do better. I'm going to heal so I can be the mother you deserve." They sat together for 45 minutes, talking about small things, Sophie's school, her friends, a new book she was reading, normal mother-daughter conversation, healing in its ordinariness. When the session ended, Marcus returned. The look he gave Emma was complex: pity, anger, understanding, and something that might have been respect. "Thank you to you," Emma said, "for bringing her, for not giving up on me completely." "I didn't do it for you," Marcus said bluntly. "I did it for Sophie. She needs her mother. Even a fractured one is better than none at all." Emma nodded. "I'll earn your trust back, however long it takes." After they left, Mercer joined Emma in the therapy room. She sat holding Sophie's drawing like a lifeline. "I won't let her become me,"
Emma said fiercely. Whatever it takes, however long this healing process requires, I won't let this trauma claim another generation. Then we keep working, one day at a time, one integrated moment at a time.
Exactly 4 months had passed. Emma Whitmore stood at the gate of the Connecticut mansion for the first time since being hospitalized. The property had been sold to a contractor who planned to demolish the mansion and build luxury apartments. However, before demolition could begin, a police investigation quietly initiated at Dr. Hayes's request required the basement to be completely excavated. Every detail there was crucial. The massive construction project had to wait for those details. Mercer stood beside Emma with Marcus and 2 detectives. Sophie was with Marcus's sister that day. Some truths were still too heavy for a 10-year-old child to witness. Not every child could handle it, and she couldn't. "You don't need to be here," Mercer said quietly. "You gave your statement. You did everything you needed to do." "I need to see it." Her voice was steady now, a single voice that contained multitudes. The integration therapy had worked. She was no longer Emma or David or Lily or Rachel or Alexandra or the witness. She was all of them, woven together into one scarred but functional whole. I need to know the witness was telling the truth, that I'm not still fractured and hallucinating. The forensic team had been working for 3 days. Yesterday, they'd found the first remains behind the western wall of the basement, exactly where the witness had said they would be. DNA testing would take weeks, but the approximate age and gender matched Christopher Martinez, 12 years old, dead for 28 years, finally found. Detective Maria Santos approached, her expression grim. "Mrs. Whitmore, we found something else, buried deeper, beneath the foundation, remains of at least 3 other children, different ages, different time periods. This goes back further than 1996, possibly to the 1980s. My father bought this estate in 1982. I was born in 1986. We're cross-referencing missing children cases from that era, but Mrs. Whitmore," the detective hesitated, "I need you to understand something. The men your father associated with, the ones you've named in your testimony, they're powerful. Their lawyers are already attacking your credibility. They're calling this a witch hunt based on recovered memories. The DA isn't sure we can prosecute even with the physical evidence." "I know," Emma said. "The witness warned me. Justice and truth aren't always the same thing." "But we found them," Detective Santos said firmly. "Those children, we found them. We're giving them back their names. We're telling their families what happened. That's worth something." "Is it?" Emma's voice broke slightly. "Is it worth anything if the men who killed them walk free?" Mercer spoke for the first time. "It's worth everything to those families. To know their children didn't abandon them, to have closure, to bury them properly." He put a hand on Emma's shoulder. "And it's worth everything to Sophie, because you stopped the cycle. You spoke the truth even when it cost you everything. You showed our daughter that silence isn't safety." Emma turned to look at the mansion where she'd grown up. Its elegant facade hid decades of horror. Soon it would be rubble. Maybe that was its own kind of justice. "I want to make a statement to the press. I want other survivors to know they're not alone, that if their minds fractured to protect them, they're not crazy, they're not broken, they're survivors." Mercer felt pride swell in his chest. This was the woman Emma had become. Not the traumatized child, not the fractured adult, but an integrated survivor willing to use her pain to help others. "The media attention will be intense, intrusive, painful. I know. But staying silent protects the perpetrators. Speaking out protects the victims." Emma's green eyes were clear, determined.
I spent 28 years letting my trauma control me. I let it split me into pieces. I let it poison my marriage and almost destroy my relationship with my daughter. No more. I'm taking my story back. I'm making it mean something.
The press conference took place 2 weeks later. Emma sat next to her lawyer, while Marcus sat on the other side, showing surprising support. They were like two commanders fighting together to reveal the truth. Mercer watched from the back of the room as Emma read the statement she had prepared. My name is Emma Whitmore. I am 38 years old. I am a mother, a daughter, and someone who has suffered serious childhood trauma. I have experienced events that no one can understand or explain. For a large part of my life, I suffered from dissociative identity disorder, formerly known as multiple personality disorder. My mind split into several different identities to cope with memories too painful for one person to bear. The room was silent, except for the sound of camera shutters. I am speaking today because remains of multiple children have been found at my family's former estate. One of those children was Christopher Martinez. Another was his younger brother, Miguel. Both were murdered in 1996. Other children, whose identities are still being determined, were killed earlier. My father, Richard Whitmore, was involved in these crimes. So were other powerful men whose names I have provided to law enforcement. A murmur ran through the assembled reporters. Emma's hands trembled slightly, but her voice remained steady. I know many people will question my credibility. I have a diagnosed mental illness. I've been hospitalized. I drove my car into a lake. I am not a perfect victim, but perfect victims don't exist. Trauma is messy. Survival is complicated, and the human mind will do extraordinary things to protect itself from unbearable truth. She paused, gathering herself. To other survivors out there, people whose minds fractured under the weight of trauma, people who've been told they're crazy or unreliable or broken, I want you to know something. Your fractured mind saved your life. It protected you when no one else would. And now, with help, with treatment, with compassion, you can become whole again. Not the same as you were before. Those cracks will always show, but whole, functional, even strong. Emma's eyes found Mercer's in the crowd. He nodded encouragingly. To the men who did this, who thought their power and money would protect them forever, you were wrong. To the people who stayed silent, who chose reputation over truth, you were complicit. And to my daughter, Sophie, who I hope never sees this, but probably will someday, I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from my pain, but I promise I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never carry it alone. The questions that followed were brutal. Reporters asked about her mental state, her motives, her credibility. Emma answered each one with remarkable composure, neither defensive nor apologetic. She was simply present, truthful, whole. 3 months after the press conference, Emma was discharged from the hospital. Not cured, DID didn't have a cure, but stable, integrated, ready to rebuild her life. Mercer walked her to the hospital entrance, where Marcus and Sophie waited in the car. Emma carried a small bag of belongings and a folder of coping strategies, emergency contacts, and medication schedules. Thank you, she said, turning to face him, for not giving up on me, for believing the witness, for helping me become one person again. You did the hard work, Mercer replied. I just held the space for it to happen. How are things with your wife? Mercer smiled sadly. We're in couples therapy. She's moved back in. It's fragile, but it's there. Turns out I had some integration work of my own to do, balancing the doctor who saves others with the man who needs to save his own life too. The cracks always show, Emma quoted her own words, but that's okay. That's okay, Mercer agreed. Emma hugged him briefly, then walked toward her family. Sophie burst from the car and ran to her mother, and Mercer watched as Emma caught her daughter and spun her around, both of them laughing. It wasn't a perfect ending.
nor was it an ending where everyone would be happy. The criminal cases filed against Richard Whitmore's partners likely would fail. Emma would struggle with dissociative symptoms for the rest of her life. Sophie would need therapy to overcome her mother's trauma. Marcus and Emma would never reconcile romantically. But life had to go on and be lived as it was. But Emma was whole. She was there. She was healing. She wanted it and fought hard for it to happen. And sometimes, as Mercer returned to the hospital, he thought that was enough. Sometimes just surviving was a victory in itself. Sometimes the cracks in a person's soul were not a sign of weakness, but a testament to resilience, proof that even when broken, they found ways to hold themselves together. The mind's fortress, he had once thought, should be impregnable. But from Emma's journey, he had learned that true strength wasn't about being unbreakable. It was about breaking and learning to mend. It was about breaking and discovering how to become whole again, stronger, more resilient, more unbreakable. It was about being human.